Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver and my mission is to bring you closer to organic Japanese green tea, and today we're gonna dive into Spring Edition 2021 versus 2020. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna compare a Shincha, which is the Kazugaen Shincha from Mr. Kawaji, and actually here we are going into the 2021 versus the 2020, and I want to dive into a little bit what are the taste differences of the same tea in two different years, and a little bit diving into the myth of is Shincha really the best tea, so the fresh plucked tea, or does a tea which is from the last year taste as well as good as the newly and the freshly picked tea. So what I have here with me is that I have the usual suspects. So we have two different kyusus, then we have the plates where we have a look at the teas, we have the bottom glasses, always important to be in the session, and we have the two teas. Both of them I want to take 5 grams and then really compare these two teas. So good. Number one, for you to see, the tea still looks fresh and green. So there we definitely see that the tea is still good. So normally you can keep a Sencha up to 2 to 3 years. Often farmers, they say after 1 year they don't want to have it much longer, but most of them are absolutely fine to also tell you that you can keep them at least for 2 years. So this one still very fresh. Maybe I can even see, so it has been packaged in last July, so we are close to 1 year now of this tea, and especially the harvest has been in April last year, so we talk about around 1 year and 2 months since the harvesting of this tea. And here we have the fresh one of 2021. I think I'm gonna pour it directly into the plate. Good. Okay. So now first, this is 2021. Here 2020, what we see is that what is quite interesting is that the 2020 is a little bit, has a slight hint of more yellow. Meanwhile, 2020 definitely has a very dark, very beautiful green. Mr. Kawaji didn't change the shading, so the shading process of these two teas are also around 7 to 8 days. So both of them produced in the same manner, just different types, or different years. So when we are looking into the region of the tea, so this tea is grown around or in the region of Kagoshima. This is very, very far south. So also the harvesting is earlier. When we are talking about the first harvest, then often the smaller islands in the south of Kagoshima, so Kagoshima, the biggest city actually in the very south of the main island, but sometimes you can find Yakushima or Tanageshima, which are islands which are even further south, and they often have the first harvest of the year, which is mostly even in the beginning of April, or it can be also, if it is a very early year, then in the late March. But normally Japanese green tea plucking starts in around mid-April in the very south, and then it goes up to mid-May, end of May, when we go moving up further north until the most northern region, which is Shizuoka, if we talk about big regions, but there are some smaller farmers which are even located around Tokyo. So here absolutely a later harvest of mid to end May, or even in colder years, early June. So when we talk about the cultivar, so here this is an Asatsuyu, or is called, the tea is called Asatsuya Fukamushi, so is Asatsuyu. Is actually an early budding cultivar. Here we're talking about a cultivar which is which is ready around 7 to 8 days before the Yabukita, which is kind of the reference of the plucking. So if you're talking about early budding cultivar, then it just in reference to Yabukita it is earlier, or in the reference to Yabukita it is later. For example, a later budding cultivar is the Okumidori, which is around 5 to 7 days later than the Yabukita. But as you can see, we talk here about the time frame of 2 weeks, so not too far away from each other, but still some of them are used especially for Shincha and Asatsuyu or Kuritawase, for example. These are cultivars, so green tea types, which are then used for these kinds of tea or for the Shincha. But Shincha only actually means just the first harvest, the very first plucking. To have it even earlier than these early budding cultivars are used, but normally you can also say that it is a Shincha of Yabukita if it's really the first harvest of the Yabukita. So it's not in a given segment or related to a given cultivar that the Shincha is referred to, but it is just this very first harvest. And as we want to be very fast in the market, and this is a little bit from the tradition from earlier times, is you wanted to be the first one hitting the market, getting the highest price, because the Japanese tea consumer, they were very expecting this very first fresh harvest, because at the time in the 1950s or 1960s, cooling wasn't so easy, not a lot of farmers could afford it, and also the technology was not on the level. So actually what was the key is to get this very first harvest very fast into your teapot to enjoy the fresh new harvest of the year you were in. So nowadays this has a little bit changed, because nowadays we have also a cooling system which support and allow the farmers to really keep kind of tea longer cool and then let it even develop. So for example, when we talk about Gyokuro, they're absolutely after 6 to 18 months, this is a little bit the period where the Gyokuro really enters its best stage, its best kind of taste profile, and then it can move up to 3 years where it's really at the pinnacle stage, and then it can deteriorate a little bit, but even then the Gyokuro can become even sweeter and smoother. So some people, they even keep the Gyokuro for 5, 6, 7 years just to have aged Gyokuro, and then actually this tea becomes more smooth and more sweet. And this is something also for matcha, which is done. Often the matcha is harvested and then it is stored for a certain amount of time. The reason behind this is that actually the polyphenols, they break down over time, and leaving more space in the taste profiles for the amino acids. Amino acids are the sweeter particles, so actually you're moving as a farmer from a little bit more of an astringent matcha to a little bit more a sweeter matcha. And that's why also sometimes you hear that this matcha, before it's even made into powder, then the farmers, they keep them for up to 6, even 12 months, much longer they don't keep it. But this is a little bit just to help the flavor to move a little bit into the sweeter direction. But back to these two teas. So here we talk about Asatsuyu from 2020 versus 2021. So let's start directly into the tasting of this tea. So 5 grams of 2021 and 5 grams of 2020. Good. So this is a Fuka Mushi, as you might have seen before when I was showing you the leaves. The leaves, they are a little bit more brittle. This is due to the long steaming process of the Fuka Mushi, or deep steaming, how they call it in English. So this is a little bit this kind of prolonged steaming method, but it's not kind of a very, very big difference between the normal steeping and the deep steeping. So deep steaming, we talk about the double of the time, but we talk about 60 seconds, for example, versus 30 seconds, or around 1.5 minute maximum versus maybe 45 seconds. So it's not a huge difference, but still this small difference of taking the fresh tea leaves, putting them in the steam bath, and then just making it a little bit longer gives the tea a very sweet, round and strong umami flavor, and it makes the tea cells a little bit softer. They break down more easily and then make the tea a little bit brittle. So it's not a bad sign or kind of a bad quality sign for the tea. It's just a different way of consuming this tea, and it was mainly due to making tea which is kind of intermediate quality, to render it a little bit more sweeter. After the Second World War, this was a technique which was developed. So here we talk about kind of making tea which is not highest quality even sweeter, that the Japanese tea consumer could enjoy it. Good. So then let's take the first brewing. Et voilà. Important to take out all the water. So when we have a look at the water color, what we can see, this one here is slightly more greener. So coming from the leaves, these were the darker or the greener leaves with a strong hint in its dark green color. So here we can see for the liquor side, it is a little bit greener, slightly. It's very small, the difference, but there's actually definitely something you can see here, a little bit more of a greener hue. Meanwhile, here we have a slight yellowish, slightly different color. What it is said about the asatsuyu is actually that the asatsuyu itself, it gives it, the tea, a little bit more of this slight green, but with a hint of yellow. Here, beautifully done this year, in my opinion, is that this tea is very green, very beautiful. Here we get a little bit this yellow hue, a little bit more, but both teas are strongly pushing into the green territory in terms of color. When we look at the smell of the leaves after the first brewing, so let's see, 2020. I get a lot of umami, so a little bit this sweet corn flavor profile. I got a little bit of fruit, goes a little bit in the banana. A little bit of a nutty flavor profile, so cashew nut is mixing in with this one here. And now when we go, okay, they're very close. It seems to me that this one here shows a little bit more of a, Here we have a slightly fresher tones, a little bit more of a greener tones. I get a little bit more of a slight spinachy undertone. If I compare it now to this, both teas are pushing strong into a little bit this sweeter area, but when I just compare them one by one, here we have a little bit more like in the tea from 2020, it's a little bit more settled, a little bit more kind of developed into this full flavor of kind of sweeter, fruitier tones. Meanwhile, the 2020 is definitely showing a little bit more of a grassier flavor profile. So, and let's see. Now, in terms of tasting, we start with 2021. Okay, I get quite a grassy tone. That's interesting. It is definitely sweet. I get a little bit of resin, green resin. Green fresh resin is definitely the flavor profile I get the most. And with this green resin flavor profile, I get as well a little bit of a fresher spinacher. But in the end, I get a lot of edamame as well. Get a little bit of banana peel. And kind of the density brings in a little bit this nutty, more nutty flavor profile of cashew nut. This is something I get here. So again, repeat. So I got a little bit of this greener flavor profile, moving then into more edamame, then coming in from a little bit from the banana peel, with a slight ending of this more nuttier, kind of cashew nuttier flavor profile. So quite fresh in my opinion. I was drinking the Asatsuyu quite a lot, and from the 2020 harvest, I got a little bit more kind of the stronger kind of fruit flavor. Here, what I get now from the first harvest is definitely that I get much more greener tones. But now I want to compare it to the 2020. Maybe my memory just tries to trick me. It's softer, it's late summer grass. Much more fruit. We are moving even from the banana peel into the peachy region of taste profile. So the difference of 2020 and 2021 is definitely in this more intense, fresher. It's kind of early, kind of spring fresh cut grass versus kind of fresh cut grass of later summer, a little bit stronger, moving it slightly, but only a little bit into more hay flavor profile. But this one then showing much more kind of this developed fruit flavor. So it seems that through the age of the tea, this tea seems to move a little bit more into fruit flavor profile, to develop this a little bit further, to have a little bit more complexity there. What's in the beginning is that you have a little bit more of this kind of more summer grass flavor profile. So typically kind of a spinachy flavor profile. And here we talk about spring grass, fresh spinach, baby spinach, and then moving into this kind of banana peel, but in the fruit flavor, it's not fully developed. So my belief is now here is comparing these two is a little bit depends also what you are looking for. When you're a huge fan of these more fresh cut, early spring grass flavors, then actually the 2021, if you consume it right away and within the next months, then definitely you get more of these notes, but still you get a nice sweet tea. Astringency is not present in this tea in my opinion. There's maybe a small hint if you're super sensitive to it, but in general no astringency attached to this tea. When you leave the tea a little bit and you wait a little bit for the tea to develop, then after around 6 months, this tea moves a little bit more in these fruit flavors. And this is something, it's also for me a little bit more full-bodied. It's a little bit heavier as well, a little bit more character. And that's actually what I like about this tea now from 2020. But let's do the second brewing. Let's pour this away. And do a second brewing. Here, second brewing, super simple. Only a little amount of time. 20 seconds is enough. I think I need here a little bit more. Voila. Good. Voila. And the second one. Again, in terms of color, we see that this one has a slightly more yellowish color, and this one a little bit more greener. But the difference is really, really very small. But let's try 2020. There's a little bit of acidity mixing in now, so I get a little bit more of kind of a citrusy note, but still very sweet at the back end. But the citrusy note is definitely present. So here you get a little bit of astringency mixing in, but we still get this kind of edamame flavors, fresh baby spinach, and banana peel. Yeah, it stays super similar, this tea, actually, from the first to the second. The only change is that it gets a little bit fresher, a little bit more intense in the fresher notes. And here with the 2020, okay, that's now interesting. So when we take the 2021 harvest, we definitely get a more citrusy note and fresher notes mixing into the taste profile of the tea. When we are talking about the 2020, it stays very mellow. So this kind of breaking down of the polyphenols really seems to manifest itself, especially in the second brewing, where in 2021 we really get these fresh citrusy notes, a little bit more of an astringency mixing in. It's not strong, it's just freshens the tea a little bit up, makes it a little bit more refreshing. Meanwhile, the second brewing of the 2020 stays very mellow. Got a lot of peach, peas, some kind of green peas. So kind of the sweetness of the green peas. I get the peaches, and I get quite a decent amount of nuttiness, cashew nuttiness. So super interesting now. So this is actually where the 2020 harvest, they really take the biggest distance on kind of the distance in terms of taste profile. Meanwhile, here the tea stays very smooth and strong on these kind of sweeter tones. Here we get much more of a freshness, a little bit more citrusy tones coming in. So this is actually quite interesting for me. That especially on the second brewing, that we have this difference between these two teas. So definitely what you can do is, if you don't like too much this kind of more citrusy tones, one thing you can do, so I brewed now the tea at 70 degrees Celsius, which is 165 Fahrenheit. So you can also mellow this a little bit down and bring the water temperature to 60 degrees Celsius, so 140 Fahrenheit. This definitely helps just to regulate also a little bit this these astringent tones, which especially show itself in the second brewing, if you don't like that one. If you like more refreshing and kind of this fresher notes, then definitely buying the first harvest in the year it comes out. And this is a little bit what Shinchas are also known for. It's a little bit more of this grassier, fresher tones, and this definitely here manifests itself in a little bit more of citrusy notes as well, mixing in the second brewing. If you like it a little bit more mellow, then an option could be that you buy older tea, that you ask your vendor if the tea is from this year or maybe from last year, because over time, if the tea is properly stored, there is no deterioration in quality. It's just that the tea moves a little bit more from these fresher tones to sweeter tones. And then definitely this could be an option for you, and try it for yourself. But if you have the chance, if you have an older tea at home and you see your vendor having a new tea and bringing in the fresh harvest, just compare these two and see for yourself what you could prefer, what you might like, and then you might find the proper kind of way how you want to enjoy your sencha at home. So thanks a lot for watching, and I guess I see you next time. And if you ever have a question, leave a comment down below, or just send us a DM on Instagram, Facebook, a message, or also on TikTok. You can reach us. Thanks a lot. See you and bye-bye.